Space Shuttle, this is flight safety. Keep your hands on the handrail or inside the vehicle and remain seated while in motion. You are clear for launch. Have a great flight to Starport 75.
Hi, Glenn.
Hey, Chris, how are you?
Oh, man, it's been forever since we've spoken. How
It
have you been?
It's been fine. Been fine.
Good.
They're doing well, yeah.
All right. That last show was pretty good. Got a lot of good feedback on that.
That's right. Especially those picks of the week at the end.
Yeah. Except people thought I talked too much, which I don't blame them. I mean, that's
everybody knows.
There's a little too much of me in that
loves
last show.
The Chris-centric shows.
Yeah. So you know what we're gonna do?
What are we gonna do?
We're gonna do another one that's mostly me.
Yay!
Actually, no. I'm gonna need your help with this one quite a bit,
right. Well,
and you'll see why. Yeah, you'll see why in a second. Because
right.
I am way out of my depth with this one. So you're gonna. I need you standing by with the life preserver. You know, like on the lifeguard on the thing. Just making sure I don't go underwater. So, but this is one of our newfangled. What do we got? Is there a name for these attraction shows?
We used to call them Remember the Magic segments.
Right. That's right. And they grew up to be their own thing.
That's right. Yeah. So I mean, we can call them whatever, but yeah. So Remember the Magic.
Okay.
Type thing.
So in the last one, you did all the research on the what was it you did?
The wonderful Country Bear Jamboree.
Oh,
one of your favorite attractions of all time.
Yeah, if I can get my family to go on it. Or go see
well,
it.
I mean, most people are scared of bears, so I can understand that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, not my little one. My 2-year-old, he loves bears.
Yeah,
beers. That's what he says. Beers. It's cute to me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, I thought we'd do something a little different this time.
Okay.
What's that? We'll kind of do the opposite. Because last time we went sort of like retro and rustic, right?
Yeah.
Now we'll go sci-fi, a little future.
Okay.
How's that sound to you?
I could do that.
And I don't remember. I do know why I picked this one. Because I said, you know what, Glenn, I'll take the next one to do the research. And I remember why I picked this one. You want to know why?
Why is that?
Do you have any sort of like emotional scars that you just can't get past in your life? You know what I'm talking about?
Sure. Yeah.
This is one of those things for me, and I'll tell you why. So one of the things it started with me saying, you know what, I want to talk about the mission to Mars.
Okay.
Remember that show?
Yeah.
In Tomorrowland?
Yes, I do.
At Disney World. So when I first went to Disney World, I went with my stepbrothers and family and whatnot, and they had been to Disney World before, and I never had. And I still remember, and this was 84, summer of 84, I think. And I still remember we're going around Tomorrowland, and I said, "Hey, what Mission to Mars? I love space stuff. Can we go on that one?"
Mm-hmm.
And they said, "Nah, it's not that good." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, I mean, you guys know you've been here before." Mm-hmm. Figuring, whatever, I'll come here again in the future, whatever. So we didn't go on the Mission to Mars, and or Flight to Mars, whatever it's called, and so I never got to go on it. And then it closed, and so I never got to go on that attraction.
You never went on that attraction at all?
No.
Really?
Isn't that sad?
Oh, all right. Okay.
Yeah. So you see my the scar that just won't heal is that forever lost to time. So this is kind of a virtual memory lane kind of thing for me because I never got to go on it. But it spurred me to say, okay, well, let me find out more about this attraction because not having been on it, I have no firsthand account for what it was to actually ride it.
Yeah.
So I figured, and you can, in my research and looking through, then I can kind of virtually do that, and you can share your thoughts about it. Mm-hmm. But that's what I figured I'd talk about. So, do you have any memories of it? Do you want to talk about it first, or
yeah?
What do you know about it?
Well, I mean, it was I rode the Mission to Mars attraction at Disney World.
Yeah, we'll talk about its variations, but
yeah. So when I rode it, it was Mission to Mars, and I rode it, a bunch of times. It was there probably through it probably closed in 92 or so, somewhere in there.
Yeah, close. I have notes here. 92. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I did the college program in 91, and so I did it a few times then, and the trips before that. So I probably rode it. Maybe I would ballpark it at, I don't know, 10 times maybe max.
Okay. Did you like it? I mean, what'd you think of it at the time? Did you agree with my stupid stepbrothers at the time that said, "Nah, don't go out. It's not worth it"?
Yes, but I still wish you had experienced it for yourself.
Yeah, me too.
But yeah, it definitely wasn't state of the art Disney Imagineering.
Well, would you characterize it that way? That I mean, was it? And I'll talk through kind of its incarnations, but talking about the last one, the Mission to Mars. Do you say it wasn't good Imagineering? Was it just bad Imagineering, or was it just it got outdated too? Like, was it the best they could do at the time?
Well, it definitely got outdated too quickly. So so the first time I wrote it was probably I was a kid. In the mid to between 76 and 79, I wrote it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
For the first time, and I remember my dad didn't love it, so we probably only wrote it maybe once or twice, in those 4 years. But as I went back,
in 76, you said,
yeah, 76 to 79, it was, and I don't I don't really remember it from that young. I just remember it from the last times, when I was 20 years old, writing it. So, but yeah, it was definitely by 92 when it closed. It was definitely, you'd go in and I appreciate it for what it was. But if you had no sense of, the placement of this attraction in Disney history, there's a screen in the middle of the floor and then a screen on the middle ceiling. Yeah, I don't want to talk too much about it.
Hang on. I'll walk through it. But what's interesting is that the times you put, and maybe this is a good place. We'll kind of jump back to the kind of the beginnings of this thing. So, because you said like 76 to 79. Yeah. Well, Mission to Mars, it was redone in 75. So I mean, you wrote. Okay. It wasn't when you first wrote it. It wasn't outdated. That was right. That was pretty new at that time. But it was based on an attraction that goes way, way back. So that was probably, they're probably just trying to do the best they could with what they had at the time. Yeah. So I'm going to tell you a bunch of stuff that you already know, and I'm probably going to get half of it wrong. So you can correct me. But maybe the people out there don't know. So cue the harp music or the fancy sci-fi music, whatever we use to go back in time to all the way to 1955. Right?
Okay. Come with us. When you wish upon a star. Come and remember the magic.
So, do you remember what happened in 1955?
Yeah, I think a place called Disneyland opened.
Yeah, little place called Disneyland. Yeah. Just a dream and sparkle in its eye. Right. So it opened, and it had an attraction called Rocket to the Moon, which is the great granddaddy to the Mission to Mars, right? Mm-hmm. So it started Rocket to the Moon. Now we got to place ourselves in this. This is why I find this interesting, because I'm a space nerd. Is you got to think back and put yourself in the right frame of mind for the time period. This is 1955. Mm-hmm. Sputnik hasn't happened yet, right? 55, like the first satellites haven't gone up, so there's been no rockets. So there's barely rockets. I mean, they did rockets, but there was no space travel. There's none of that. But so Disney had and probably came out of all their Tomorrowland futuristic stuff, leading up to the building of Disneyland and all that. But you put yourself in that mindset. This is pretty futuristic to have an attraction to try and convey what it would feel like to travel from the Earth to the Moon, essentially, right? Yeah. So pretty futuristic for the time. So the concept of the attraction, like you were just about to describe, is that it's a circular theater, right? Mm-hmm. And there were originally 3 levels of seats, and kind of like a pretty steep arena, almost kind of feel, not that huge like an arena, but and it probably fit like 100 people. I couldn't find an exact number, but
yeah, it sounds about right.
Maybe 100 people. Maybe it got up to that when they added a 4th one later. But anyway, so you're kind of sitting in this full circular thing. And in the middle of the room, there's a screen on the floor, and then there's a screen at the top, right, in the ceiling. Do I have that right so far?
Yep.
And so, and I guess it would. There was sort of a lot of what today we would consider kind of cheap effects, where like it would like shake the seats and like with the rocket taking off and stuff.
Yeah. And
I think I read, and I don't know which incarnation was actually in. It might have been the original. Sounds like it was. But the cushions of the seats actually were pneumatic. They had air, they could control the air in them. So they would change the air pressure to make it feel like G-forces, like it were pushing you into your seat.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you remember that from when you wrote it or not. But So, for the time, I mean, neither one of us is thankfully old enough to remember that far back, maybe, but so I couldn't find like what the initial reaction was to it. So I don't know if you have any history of that, but I didn't get the sense people thought it was terrible back then.
No.
It was pretty groundbreaking because, again, 1955, there's been no space travel yet. Nothing, right? Like, Kennedy hasn't said, let's go to the moon, none of that stuff. It was a D-ticket ride, which I found interesting because I don't recall hearing about D-tickets that much. You know the little small ones, and of course you know about E-tickets. But these are sort of on the precipice of greatness, right? They're bigger than average, but not big enough.
Well,
so
I mean, yeah, but so what happened with the tickets was, so it was originally sponsored by TWA, right, and then it went to McDonnell Douglas,
right,
but TWA wanted people to ride the attraction, right? So they didn't want people to spend a lot of money.
Oh, I see.
Right. Okay. So they would subsidize the cost.
Oh, okay.
Like if you had wings at Disney World, was always free because Eastern sponsored it and they wanted you to go on it because it was a commercial for Eastern.
Oh, okay. I never realized that connection. Okay.
Yeah. So certain attractions that were sponsored by major sponsors didn't tend to have the e-ticket. They tended to have a lower ticket letter because that cost was being subsidized.
Okay. See, I've learned things.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I asked. So it was a D-ticket attraction, which I don't remember what that would cost, and I have no memory of because I started going after that, but using the tickets for individual attractions, but regardless. But that what I found interesting, and I didn't realize because this attraction has a history where it goes through, and they came out with updated versions, but I didn't realize they completely demolished the original Rocket to the Moon building in '66. I don't know if you know that or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Of course you do. You know everything. Which I think might have at the time included the iconic rocket.
Yes.
I couldn't find, or I didn't write down the exact date, but I think it was part of that demolition that went away.
Yeah. Well, yes.
Yeah, which is really a shame. And I know it's come back and whatever, but in a way. But you can kind of see why at the time, because it was very sort of 50s sci-fi. It almost looked juvenile in our concept of what space travel was in the 50s versus now we're talking 66. So now we've got a history of space travel. Mercury missions have gone up. We're in the middle or actually the end of Gemini into the Apollo era now. So, to the contemporaries of the time, that would have looked very old-fashioned because now we have Saturn V rockets and these, very, very modern-looking things. So it would have looked kind of dated at the time. So where right now to us looking back at it, it's all sort of retro and neat, but it just probably would have looked old and shabby back then, right? That's kind of my guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they demolished it, but they rebuilt it within a year, came out with an updated version called Flight to the Moon. Which now they've added some animatronics to this. They had like a whole mission control pre-show thing, right? Which seemed pretty extensive, actually, where it's sort of like telling you, and I think this was done in partnership with NASA from what I could read, where they got a little input from them. And it was almost educational sense. It's from the, and I watched some videos on YouTube. And by the way, kudos, as always, to the Martin's tribute videos.
Yeah.
Because he had a great one on this one. Again, for me, not having been able to be at them, it's probably the closest thing I could get to it. Anyway, so I watched that and the pre-show, and it almost seemed a little educational, almost felt a little Epcot-ish, right? Because we're going to have a little entertainment. We're going to teach you a little bit about going to the moon, because space travel was all the, again, this is 67, right? So in the heat, in the heart of the Apollo program. And I didn't know this, and you're gonna hate me and think I should have known this, but this is where Tom Morrow comes in, right? Because the narrator at Mission Control, the flight director, whatever, he was Mr. Tom Morrow.
Flight 92 is now ready for boarding.
On the large monitor, you can see your McDonnell Douglas lunar transport. The countdown is in progress and all systems are go. Have a pleasant flight.
Thank you, Mr. Morrow. Ladies and gentlemen, please follow me to the boarding area.
Now, Glenn, where else have we heard about Mr. Tom Morrow?
Well, in the last incarnation of the People Mover, they the announcer page for Mr. Morrow, Mr. Tom Morrow.
Right.
Please give your party from Saturn a ring.
Which I always loved. And it's not there anymore. I'm not sure why. On the people over. But anyway, it's not there. But I didn't realize that was a little nod back to the flight director of the Flight to the Moon from the late 60s.
Yes.
And obviously, this still predates Disney World, right? Because we're in the 60s. But this is the attraction that was, and I think it was pretty much a copy of it, that was part of opening day attractions for Disney World in 71, right?
Yes.
So it was pretty much the same thing there. So, and one thing I'll note is they had a, I think it was this one. Might have been the Mission to Mars. Do you remember there was a little gag with they like all of a sudden alarms started going off with mission control, like, oh my gosh, something's going on. And the gag was it was a bird that was flying in, and the bird like it tripped and actually fell on its face. It was like a nature documentary video of this silly bird.
Yeah.
Oh no, not again.
Stand by. Video signal coming in on all channels.
Just as I thought. Somehow this silly bird trips the emergency system every time he comes in. And I think he knows the laugh's on us.
Was that in the original or was that in the updated Mission to Mars?
I know it was in Mission to Mars.
Yeah, maybe it came along later. But anyway, and I'll talk about that bit in a second because it follows through to something else. Okay, but we had Flight to the Moon, and that was pretty good, but not too long after that, relatively speaking. Like we said in 75. Now we've been to the moon. Right now we've landed, a half dozen times, or at least tried to. We've had Skylab. We've had, now it's like, oh no, we're going to go to the moon. Like in another 10 years, we're going to be living up there, right? So they updated it to Mission to Mars. Still the same basic concept. That idea of the circular main attraction area, which for those of it that know later Disney know that it eventually became the extraterrestrial, and then the Stitch attraction, right? Stitch's Great Escape. Is that what?
Yes.
Do I have that right?
Yeah.
So if you knew that room, that circular room, same structure and all that. But when they went to Mission to Mars, a couple of interesting things to note. For some reason, which I can't figure out, they got rid of Mr. Tom Morrow. I guess he retired.
Yeah.
And they just had Mr. Johnson, I guess named for like Johnson Space Center, whatever. Why change that? I mean, Mr. Tom Morrow had kind of a neat little ring to it. Is there? I mean, no, I guess
no. I don't know the reasoning behind that, but it was definitely Mr. Johnson from Space Control.
But one thing that I don't think too many people would realize is when they made that change, they added female participants to the mission control team.
Yeah.
Which I guess, in the Flight to the Moon one, it was all men. So nod towards that. It was mid 70s. Things were becoming a bit more modern, if you will. So that's where it was updated, and like we said, stayed that way pretty much until 92. But what I also thought was kind of interesting is that I read that as early as 1991, they started taking it out of the guidebooks and maps and things. So it almost existed in this sort of purgatory where it's like, it'll be there. We're just not going to let a lot of people know that it's there. And that's why I missed it. I started coming back to the parks in 96. So it'd been gone quite a few years by that point. So a couple of things I want to mention. We talked about sponsorship. TWA was it until 71, and then McDonnell Douglas took over sponsorship. And I guess in that rebuild that happened, they used the McDonnell Douglas kind of sweeping fin motif of their logo through the actual architecture. And there's still a hint of that at Disneyland, where I guess it's now Red Rockets Pizza Port, which is for some reason hard for me to put my head around. But if you look at the facade of that McDonnell Douglas sweeping logo is still, it makes up the front of that building. So either somebody really loved it, wanted to keep it, or for some reason it's critical to the architecture of that building or whatever. But that's still there. So if you look at pictures of that, you can kind of, if you look at the old pictures and compare the new ones, you can see where that still follows through.
Yeah.
And of course, I mentioned, Disney World, it became those other two attractions. But one of the things that I didn't really fully appreciate until I started doing this research is how much Mission Space is a successor to this attraction. And I know you probably want to talk about Mission Space in more detail later, but just that concept, because all the concept is still sort of there, is to give that sense of leaving the Earth, going to another place. There's some mishap that happens on the way, and recovering from that. And they even have little nods in Mission Space back to this. Like if you look at the pre-show area, there's a little video screen where it's showing that same video of that dumb little bird falling on its face, which I never really realized that was either there or was a nod back to the sort of original attraction. So sort of this whole, many decades of space travel that got kind of picked up with Mission Space and pulled forward. So it's a topic I wish they would do more with, because obviously it's one of my favorite areas. But it was fun to do a little research on this, and like I said, watch the video from our good friend who we've never met, Martin. I don't know who Martin is, but he does good tribute videos.
Yes.
And then I also used Yesterland, which I'm sure you know.
Yes.
That's kind of a good reference for this. So if you want to put those in the show notes, other people can learn more.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
how'd I do? Did I do all right?
You did great. You did great.
Okay.
Yeah, I never knew you had never ridden it.
Nope, never did.
I'm still shocked at that.
And you know how there's I barely remember what happened yesterday, but I still remember, and this was 1984, so it was like, I don't know, 1,000 years ago. I still remember having, standing in Tomorrowland and saying to them, well, what about that? And them going, it's not that good. And I'll never get it back. I can't ever go back. So the tribute videos is as close as I get. And I'm sure it wasn't great. I'm sure they were right. I'm sure it was, and we rode Space Mountain time after time after time after time.
Yeah.
And so, by comparison, this was nothing. But from a space enthusiast, and just Disney history, it would have been cool to see.
Yeah. Yeah, it was cool. The pre-show was probably more entertaining than the actual.
Yeah, that's kind of what I got out from the videos.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, I'm glad I did it. It wasn't one of my favorite rides. No, it wasn't. But I'm glad I got to do it. Honestly, I think Alien Encounter was a huge improvement for that location.
Really? Because that was a much maligned attraction. It was, but I thought they were. This gets way off topic, but I thought Disney. It was one time when Disney was really bold and made a choice to do something different that wasn't, based on another intellectual property that they already had, or good point.
Which they weren't doing a lot of at that time, because they were looking at synergy and stuff, but they weren't really like today, where let's just throw Nemo or Buzz at this, and So that's why I appreciate the extraterrestrial alien encounter. Because it was something different and something new, and it fit in that space perfectly, in the theater and the round and the so, but anyway, until you really brought it completely full circle with Mission Space, I don't think I ever really thought about that that connection, that it's a mission to Mars, and it's very similar. You go through a pre-show, you see mission control, you get in a capsule, and you're right. There's something that happens.
Yeah, it's like the great grandchild of the original
it really
attraction.
is.
Right?
Yeah. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, there you have a little bit of Disney history.
Yeah. So if anybody else has ridden Mission Mars, let us know. Let us know what you thought, and
that'd be cool to hear.
Yeah, it would be.
Or if anybody else had rotten, siblings that told them not to ride it. Still live with that pain every single day. Every time I walk past it. Maybe that's why I can't go to Tomorrowland. It just brings back that hurt.
Maybe.
You know what? This is why we need VR of extinct attractions.
Oh, that would be the greatest, right?
Right?
Yeah, I mean, it would be.
Get to work on that.
Okay, I'll do that.
All right. So this was the Space Rides episode. I don't know. Do you have something picked for next one?
No, not yet.
Okay.
No, I don't.
Okay. It's up to you next. It's like a ping pong match.
All right. That's fine.
All right. Well, thanks. It was fun to do the research. So thanks for letting me take this one.
All right.
Okay. See you next time.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Starport 75. Follow Chris on Twitter and Instagram at CBGray, and Glenn on Twitter and Instagram at DizWiz. Follow the show on Twitter and Facebook at Starport75 and Instagram at TheStarport75. For all things related to the show, including show notes and links to connect with us, visit us at starport75.com.